Hey everyone, welcome back to another sound-only podcast. And as you can probably tell by that opening that I'm probably going to get a strike for, I've been waiting a really long time to talk about this. So, for this podcast, we're going to be looking back into the 10 trans myths as described on the Vox article. And this myth we'll be looking at today is none other than letting trans people use the bathroom or locker room matching their gender identity is dangerous. Okay, so let's get into it. Transgender people generally prefer using the bathroom or locker room that matches their gender identity, not the one that corresponds with the gender they were assigned at birth. But conservative critics argue that this could expose others to sexual voyeurism and assault in bathrooms or locker rooms, even though there's no evidence to support this claim. Now, my issue with this is that if you think somebody will do this in a public bathroom, it does make me think that the person who's making this claim about trans people, because they like to think of trans people as people trying to trick other people into thinking that they are the opposite gender when that's not what they're doing, because I described that in a previous podcast, and they think that it's just they're trying to disguise themselves to go into the bathroom and do this. And it does make me think about the people who make these claims, because maybe this is something they would do, because they're thinking like, if I was them, I would go into the bathroom and do that. It feels like that's where that notion is coming from. It feels like that the people who should not be allowed in any bathroom is the people making claims like this, because they're the ones thinking of doing it. Nobody else is. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee perpetuated this myth at the 2015 convention, stating, "Now I wish someone had told me that when I was in high school that I could have felt like a woman when it came to time to take showers and pee. I'm pretty sure that I would have found my feminine side and said, Coach, I think I'd rather shower with the girls today." And see, he's the type of person, because he's the one bringing it up. Nobody else would do this. A trans person wouldn't do this. I mean, you can probably argue that anybody's capable of sexual assault, but then if you're going to make that argument, you might as well not have public bathrooms at all, because cis women can be sexually assaulted by other cis women without any type of sexual attraction between them. Same thing can happen to men. This type of thing doesn't involve sexual attraction. It doesn't. But as Media Matters pointed out, experts from 12 states that protect trans rights have thoroughly refuted this talking point. In the US, there is not a single reported instance of this kind of voyeurism taking place when states where legal protections for trans people exist. And we have a little infograph here, which does show it. What right-wing groups say will happen if states implement laws to protect trans people from discrimination. Pacific Justice Institute, laws would be abused and exploited by sexual predators. And now we have a group of people here who, again, should never go anywhere near other people. Sexual predators would have legitimized access to women's restrooms. Laws would allow sexual predators to gain easier access to their targets. Texas values. And now you have, plus Mike Huckabee, you have at least 3 organizations and one other person who should not be allowed in public bathrooms. They're the ones thinking, like, if I was in that situation, this is what I would do. What experts from states with laws on the books say? It's beyond specious to say laws will lead to sexual assault. This is spokeswoman for Jane Doe Inc. No problems since the passage of 2011 law. Las Vegas Police Department. Sexual assault stemming from law, not even remotely a problem. From Minneapolis. And the list goes on and on and on. If you want to check it out, you can find this article, or you can go to look it up on MediaMatters.org. In another investigation, Media Matters also found that 17 school districts around the country with protections for trans people, which collectively cover more than 600,000 students, had no problem with harassment in bathrooms or locker rooms after implementing their policies. Conservatives usually counter that there are examples of men sneaking into women's bathrooms to attack women, but as PolitiFact reported, none of the examples cited in the U.S. happened after a city or state passed a non-discrimination law or otherwise let trans people use the bathroom or locker room of their assigned gender identity. Instead, these seem to be examples of men doing awful things regardless of the law, which has unfortunately happened since the beginning of civilization. True. Well, that's the kind of thing I was wondering. The people who try to make these claims, do they think that just because you're dressed as a woman, you'll set that you can only enter a woman's bathroom if you're dressed as a woman or something like that? Do they think that you'll suddenly hit a force field and it'll stop men from entering or something like that? Is that what they think? One example is a case in Toronto, Canada, which now has a non-discrimination law in which a man disguised himself as a woman and attacked in a women's shelter. But the attacks happened months before Ontario, Toronto's province, protected trans people in a non-discrimination law, so the law couldn't have been the cause. While the issue is now being used primarily against trans people, historically bathroom fears have been regularly deployed against civil rights causes. Yeah, I can pretty much give you an example of the whole thing before the civil rights movement took up steam, which was where you had Jim Crow, where you weren't allowed to have blacks and whites even using the same bathrooms, and there were fear that black men would somehow go and sexually assault white women, because this was a stereotype that was largely perpetuated, and it's still kind of perpetuated today, by the way. You know it when you see it. Some people are also frankly just bothered by the idea that someone in the same bathroom or locker room won't share the same genitalia as them. And I don't see why that should be a problem. You shouldn't be checking, that's a person's genitalia is a private matter. You should not be checking to see you should not be checking something like that. It's creepy. Just because somebody doesn't have the same genitalia as you doesn't mean they're going to go out and sexually assault you. Because like I said before, there are plenty of examples of where cis women and cis men have been sexually assaulted by other cis women and other cis men. It doesn't matter. That thing doesn't stop it. That thing doesn't matter. It'll happen regardless of whether or not you were attracted or not, but it'll still happen regardless. It's something that can happen. So unless if you're going to use that argument, then you should just get rid of locker rooms and bathrooms entirely. This gets to the heart of the issue. Bathrooms are places where really private things happen, and that makes people feel vulnerable in all sorts of ways. People are afraid because they're exposed. Catherine Anthony Arthur of Designing for Diversity, Gender, Race, and Ethnicity in the Architectural Profession told The Guardian, "There's a vulnerability we feel in a public restroom we don't feel in other places." But a lot of things happen in public bathrooms that people aren't comfortable with, and people have managed to deal with to accommodate others' rights and needs. Perhaps it's best, LGBTQ advocates argue, to let trans people use the facility for their gender identity without making them feel ostracized or discriminated against. Discrimination is a huge contributor to gender dysphoria, a medical condition that some trans people experience that can cause depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation. I am going to do a video on my personal experience on that eventually, because it's a real doozy. But conservative lawmakers have latched onto the insecurity over bathrooms to propagate myths about power of discriminatory laws to stop horrible attacks in the bathrooms and protect people's privacy. And although these are plainly myths with no evidence behind them, they have been used in attempts to perpetuate discrimination since the Jim Crow era. So yeah, because this is something that doesn't make sense to me, and it never has, this myth, because this is something I've argued against people before with the whole thing, because people like say, oh well, women will get sexually assaulted, and I'm like, you only seem to care about trans women in women's bathrooms, but you don't seem to care about trans men in men's bathrooms, because it seems to be like you're saying men cannot be sexually assaulted. When something like that is serious, a lot of men go through that, and they don't feel safe talking about it. The thing about it is the rates at which men are probably sexually assaulted is probably much higher than what's reported, because they feel like society won't accept them if they don't come forward, or they feel shamed to not come forward about it. And like I said before, you can be sexually assaulted by someone of the same gender as you, regardless of whether or not they are into you at all. You can have cis women have sexually assaulted other cis women, cis men have assaulted other cis men. It happens. It's something that does happen, and it shouldn't. But the thing about it is, this type of discriminatory law will not prevent it. I mean, if you're going to use arguments like that, you might as well just get rid of any public place of this nature entirely, so that it doesn't happen. But does that make sense? And if they're going to use sexual urges as like a thing, that doesn't even get to the fact of what HRT does to particularly to trans women. That doesn't even get into that at all. What it does to the libido. Yeah. So the argument doesn't stand up to anything, clearly, and people should not even still be using this myth to try and create discriminatory laws, because these are the same types of things they used to say during the Jim Crow era. And if you like to say that you're against this but you're not a racist, unfortunately, no one will believe you, honestly, because if you're trying to perpetuate this, you're doing the same thing they did during that era, which wouldn't be surprising if you were in support of that if you were around that time too. All right, so that's myth number 3, I think. So I guess I'm gonna end this here before I get even madder. So be sure to check out my other videos, which Prize Box Productions videos, our channels Prize Box Gaming and Prize Box Reacts, and be sure to check out my main channel, The True Andie M. I also have a Patreon set up if you're interested in letting me do my videos full time. So thanks for watching, and stay jamming, everyone.